What's up, guys? It's me, Sam Griffin. And this is advice that I would give to my younger self to make me better at arranging. Okay, I'm going to talk about the stages that I went through, all right? Each stage, I give a different piece of advice. This is one video you're going to want to stick around for, okay? The advice that I would give my younger self really depends on the age and the basically what I'm doing in that particular process. Whether I'd say, hey, keep going, you're on the right track, you're doing good, or hey, you're leaving arranging money on the table there and you need to optimize your process, okay? Phase one is beginner phase, okay? Phase one is beginner. When I just started to play guitar, I think that's how you spell beginner. New whiteboard vids, pretty fun, huh? The reason why I think I was doing a lot of good stuff during this particular phase was because I didn't know about tabs. I didn't even know they existed at the time. And so what I would do is I would just download songs off of LimeWire and I would just learn them. And how would I learn them? I just learned them by ear. I'd sit there and I'd play the song over and over again. But the really good thing about this is that I was right at the get-go here, I was using my ear. I was already, getting in there, trying to listen to chords and stuff. I wasn't very good at it and it took a very long time, but I was using my ear. So I was on the right track. And I think that this beginning here for me is the reason that I have this YouTube channel, honestly, that I got into arranging in the first place. I showed myself that with enough hard work and enough persistence that I could actually figure out stuff by ear. So I would say in this stage, very good, A+. I would say the advice for this stage, keep going, bud. Keep going. Cursive is a lost art. Phase two, buddy. Okay? Phase two. I think I called it stage last time. Stage two, guess what it is? Tabs, baby. I found this website, and I think it still exists. I think it's called classtab.org. Edu. I don't remember what this website was called. ClassTab or Class Tabs. I don't know, but it's a gigantic database of like tons and tons of classical guitar songs that I wanted to learn. And I went on a huge rip with it, man. I learned a whole bunch of stuff. And I started learning a bunch of Barrios music. And this was really good. But it was not good for my arranging, okay? It was good for my technique and my playing and everything, because I found a composer that I really, really liked. I really enjoyed all the music. During that phase, I was not doing I was not doing what I had done in the beginning. So in the beginning, I was figuring out stuff by ear. And as I went, I found the tabs. I was like, this is amazing, dude. And there were tabs from scores, so they were really accurate. And so I kind of stopped doing my ear stuff. And this is not good. I would say for this guy, the advice I would give to this guy is keep learning by ear. That's what I would say. This is what I would do. For this guy, hey, just every so often, learn something by ear, okay? It'll pay off in the long run. Let's talk about stage three, right? Stage three was a big stage for me. Stage three is we formed SGB. So me and my man, Steve, we formed Super Guitar Bros. From stage two to stage three, I'd kind of messed around trying to figure some songs out by ear, and these were usually video game songs. So I'd spent a lot of time learning a bunch of classical pieces of music, but then I started to listen to a lot of video game music, and hell, I'd always listen to a lot of video game music, but it seemed like, hey, it'd be cool if I could play some of this stuff on my guitar. So I started to kind of do that. Around this time, this was 07, 08 or something, I met Steve, and he'd come over and I'd be like, hey man, check the stuff that I figured out on guitar. I figured out Cheek's theme or whatever. He'd be like, hey, yeah, check this out, man. I figured out Song of Storms or whatever. And we would just nerd out on guitar and video game music. And then there was a competition online for a website called Dwelling of Duels. And this was like a monthly contest that people would have. And it was this community of guys who were doing video game music arrangements. And one of the months was a Ninja Gaiden month. And Steve was like, hey, Sam, do you want to try to do a big Ninja Gaiden arrangement for that? And I said, hell yeah, let's do that. And we did that. We got second place, no big deal, right? This was an amazing stage, okay? Because I really started doing arranging regularly and seriously. And I would say to this guy, keep it up. You're doing great, but you should probably use some software. I think at this point, Guitar Pro had existed, but we weren't tabbing things out. We were just getting together and figuring stuff out by ear, going back and forth, you know, like messing around with the arrangement as we went. The process was very chaotic. It took a very, very long time. And I think that nailing down some kind of process where we were using software to actually write our parts out would have helped. Use software, bud. That's what I would say. And this is going to be a recurring theme. And if you're somebody who's doing arranging, you're not using software, you got to get on it, bud. Okay? So that's stage 3. Phase 4. Stage 4? Am I calling these phases or stages? Stage 4. Okay? So this is when I started Sam Griffin Guitar. I had a job at Costco, and I was like, screw this. And I actually had a really smart friend of mine who reverse engineered how much money I would need to make. And I was like, okay, how many patrons do I need each month to make that happen? Okay, how many patrons would I need to get on each video? Blah, blah, blah. By the way, reverse engineering your goals is a really great idea. Stage 4, I really started to do a lot of volume, okay? I really started to do a lot of solo arranging. Now, at this particular stage, I was still just guitar in lap arranging. That's what I'm gonna call it. So that's when you got your guitar in your lap and you're listening to a particular song, you know, you got your MP3 or your YouTube video playing, and you're just going measure to measure, and you're asking yourself, hey, what are the notes in this? And you're trying to figure it out. Basically trying to figure out the entire arrangement, exactly how you're gonna do the first measure, and then you're figuring out exactly how you're gonna do the second measure, and you're just going measure to measure through the entire piece of music. And that's what I was doing at that point. So this was very good for my ear, because at the end of the day, or even at the beginning of the day, you still have to be doing the ear stuff. Okay, that never changes. This stuff, the more you do of it, the better. And I was doing a lot of it at this point, and that's kind of the core skill involved in arranging, is your ability to actually hear pitches. Okay, so my advice for this guy would be to start using software and start thinking about the process. Okay, so it's like software, again, my God, broken record here. Software, and also I'm gonna draw a little light bulb, right? That's a light bulb. And to start actually consciously thinking about the process and devising ways to make it more efficient, to make it better. I think if I had done this and really thought about it, I think I could have sped up my process and made my arrangements a lot more effective, and I could have done more of them a lot easier, okay? So that's stage 4. Now, let's talk about the next stage, baby. Okay. Stage 5, right? Stage 5, which is, this is like midway of Sam Griffin Guitar. And this is when I went hard on Patreon. Don't be weird. Hard on Patreon. Don't be weird, okay? What I decided here is I decided to do one a month. Okay, so 1 a month. Okay? Now, at this point, I started getting good. I started iterating on the process a little bit, and what ended up happening is I got good at using multiple programs, okay? So I devised a whole system for basically putting markers into my DAW. So for those of you who don't know what a DAW is, that's like a digital audio workstation. So like Studio One, Logic, Ableton, I think I've used Digital Performer. I've used a lot of them. But the one that I like most is Studio One. Well, I started to use markers, okay? And let's say I'm trying to find a particular, this is gonna be a crappy looking like waveform or whatever, right? This is a waveform, right? And so let's say there's a chord that's happening, right here, right? So I put markers right? It would let me put like a little flag here, and then I could put a flag over here, and I could just select that particular spot, and I could easily press the space bar and start basically from right on this chord, okay? And that made it really easy for me to go back and listen to the exact same spot that I wanted to in the particular piece of music. Now, of course, when I would want to try to figure out this spot in the song, right, I'd have to move my markers over, right? And I think I eventually learned that, in Studio One, you can do kind of like a loop selection thing. So I'd select this whole chunk right here, I'd set my points or whatever, and then I would just press the space bar and boom, I could hear that particular chord over and over again. It wasn't perfect, but it helped a lot. And one of the things that also helped is that, I would arrange, it still take me a while, so I would arrange over multiple sessions. And, at the end of my session, I would say, okay, I would put a marker that said, this is where I left off, right? So I would know next time I open the software, this is right where I left off. I wouldn't have to go back and find where I was, blah, 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 all that crap. Now I would have Studio One open, and I would also have Guitar Pro open. So this is when I started using Guitar Pro super, super heavily. In the past, in stage 4, I forgot to mention this, but I would actually pay somebody to do the tabs for me because I hated that phase of the process. I thought if I wrote down the song that I was learning in Guitar Pro, that it would waste a whole bunch of time for me. I was so used to doing it without software that I thought it would take longer and slow me down. Well, I would say, bro, when it comes to Guitar Pro, I would say, bro, what you got to do is you got to use multi-voice. Okay, now what's multi-voice? So in Guitar Pro and a lot of notation software, you're able to use multiple voices. So you could have, for example, you got your tab here, 8, 4, 5, 6, right? And then you could be putting in your tab, right? You could be putting in your stuff, and then you can switch. You could be putting in just a melody, for example, and then these would get grayed out, and then you could put in your bass line here, right? And I can edit those particular lines separately, right? So I could input this line separately and input this line separately and manipulate those lines separately. Now, this is something I didn't start doing until a little bit later, but I think this would have unlocked the most because it allows you to manipulate that. Again, we said when you use software, you take the note information and you turn it into data, and that's powerful because you can manipulate that data. But what this allows you to do is to have separate layers. It's like if you've ever messed with Photoshop, you'll have a certain layer and you can mess with that, just mess with that particular layer, and then you'll have another layer and you can just mess with that particular layer. So in the same way, you can split the music material into layers that you can edit. And that would allow, you could take this particular chunk and you could just focus on getting the bass in, right? You could just get the bass in. You could focus on just the melody, just get that line in, not worry about the bass. And then you could take that information and I could say, I just want to focus on the melody. And I could say, hey, how does this look? Where does this 3 look like? If I take this and I put it up to this string, what does that look like? Or I put it down to this particular string, what does that look like? Oh, it turns into a 7 or whatever, right? So that's the nice thing about voices and manipulating data, right? Okay, so let's talk about stage 6, okay? So this was a very exciting phase for me. I got my MIDI guitar. Some of you guys have maybe seen this. I'm at a different house right now, so I don't have it with me. But essentially, I devised this whole system. The first thing I was like, let me look up MIDI guitars on YouTube. So I started looking around because I was like, maybe I can make the input into Guitar Pro a little bit easier. So instead of typing on the keyboard, okay, I want a 3 here, I want a 5 here. What if there was a way to just play the notes into the software? And I had this kind of idea for a while. I was like, is this even possible? So I found this guitar. It's actually a Godin, and it's a nylon MIDI guitar, and it's awesome. And this was a whole journey that I went on, right? I found this guitar, I did research on it, I bought the thing. I also needed to get some kind of unit that would transmit this signal of the Godin into a box that will take this, like, I think it's a 13 pin signal. I don't know, it's weird, right? But it turns that into MIDI, right? Setting up this Axon thing and using the software was a pain. And so I ended up getting all these macros set up so that, like, I could click a button and it would open the software, get it all perfect. And then beneath my desk, I got my desk here, right? And you're not gonna be able to see this, but I had like foot pedals underneath my desk where anytime I like pushed a foot pedal, it would enable the MIDI, and then I could just like play notes on the guitar and they would just like show up in Guitar Pro. It was freaking crazy, right? It was like, this is amazing. Now, it wasn't absolutely perfect, but this was like, I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is so much faster. This freaking rules, okay? So my advice in this stage would have been to do nothing, okay? The advice, I would say, Sam, you're on the right track, bro. Don't do anything. Nothing. Don't do anything, bro. You're on to something, all right? Now, let's talk about the final frickin' stage, bro. Stage 7. So what happens in stage 7? Well, okay. So stage 6 was huge. It was huge for me, right? But stage 7 was when I really, I think, perfected everything. And this is where I am now. So this is right now. This is where I'm at. And the thing that I did with stage 7 was I made a course on guitar arranging, okay? So I made a course. Now, what happens when you make a course, right? You just think like crazy about the thing that you're making the course on, right? So I had never thought this much about arranging. And you know, I was thinking, okay, I'll just teach what I know. I'll teach my system. Maybe I'll talk about the MIDI guitar and all that. But as I made this course, I realized actually the MIDI guitar is not the most efficient way of doing it. It's actually unnecessary. But the cool thing about the MIDI guitar is in order to make the MIDI guitar do what I needed it to do, I had to do things in a very particular way. I would start out and I would do RHY, I would do rhythms first, okay? So that was the first thing I would do, okay? Rhythms go in. And essentially what this does is it splices the score into selectable chunks. So you remember earlier when I talked about, you know, I'm doing another waveform here. Earlier, when I talked about like, okay, here's a waveform, and I need to select this particular chord, right? I wanna work on this chord, and I just need to hear it played over and over again. When you take a particular piece and you slice it into the rhythms that actually exist, so let's say this chord right here happens to be a, you know, an 8th note, right? I would actually put in an 8th note into Guitar Pro, and then the whole piece would be sunk, right? So this is a whole thing. The whole piece would be sunk with the score. So I got the score right here. I got the tab going right here, right? But this is measure 1, and this is measure 2, and measure 3. So this chord would be, you know, right here, and I could just select this chunk right here in the tab and just play that over and over again and just hear exactly this chord. Because the entire piece of music, I would figure out all the rhythms of it first and I would put those rhythms in, right? But I could just select that particular rest and I could play that over and over again, and I could just hear this particular chord. I know this might not make sense, but this was a serious unlock for me. And I realized actually it's not about the MIDI guitar that's making me so fast now, okay? It's really the process. It's the rhythms first, and then it's being able to select each rest in order to hear the chords over and over again that I needed to hear. And then I started to develop a way to do arranging one-handed, okay? So one-handed arranging was huge for me. And what was cool is as I was trying to take and package up all the knowledge that I had and figure out a way to, hey, how can other people arrange really fast like me, without having to buy this like $1,500 MIDI guitar with a $300-400 little box that transmits it and set up all these macros and all this crap. How about, is there a way that I can do this with just a mouse, so that they can have their left hand on the fretboard, actually finding the notes, and then their other hand is actually inputting everything into Guitar Pro. And that's what I figured out when I actually made this course, right? And now there's a whole bunch of other parts of the process that I learned through making this course, because I thought about arranging so much. I needed to make it as efficient as possible for other people. And hey, just so I don't forget, if anybody is interested in learning this stuff, there's a link down in the description. You can click it if you want to and learn more, okay? That's all I'm gonna say about that. But it was through going through all these, this process of iteration with the MIDI guitar, and back developing my ear in the very beginning, and then using markers in the software and all this crap, and then finally actually making the course and forcing myself to think through the process and think, what is actually the most efficient way to do XYZ thing? What is the most efficient way to figure out what key I should do this particular piece in? What is the most efficient way to figure out what fingers to use? Because I'm gonna have to teach this to people. And I think that just doing this course took me from like what was like 70%, and it took me to 100%. Right? So I learned all of this stuff, the 70% I learned over the course of, 15 years, right, of guitar arranging experience. But then all it took was for me to think about this stuff for about a year to take my arranging from 70 to 100%. So my advice to me right now, well, I don't have any advice to me right now, but maybe in another year I'll have advice for me right now for stage 7. Okay, who knows? Maybe. Anyway, let me know what you think about this whiteboard video. I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I bought this freaking whiteboard and my handwriting's not good. But you guys let me know if you like this style of video. Me just talking and talking and teaching and talking, baby. That's what I call it, all right? So let me know what you guys think. Wait, did I leave anything out? That's it, man. That's the journey, baby. Okay. See you next time.